in loading herself down with the weight of my arms and ammunition, and the awkwardness of the long rifle which she was unaccustomed to bearing. I could have knelt and kissed her hand in reverence and gratitude, nor am I ashamed to say that this is precisely what I did after I had been freed from my bonds and heard the story of her trials. Brave little Ajor, wonder girl out of the dim, unthinkable past! Never before had she been kissed, but she seemed to sense something of the meaning of the new caress, for she leaned forward in the dark and pressed her own lips to my forehead. A sudden urge surged through me to seize her and strain her to my bosom and cover her hot young lips with the kisses of a real love; but I did not do so, for I knew that I did not love her, and to have kissed her thus with passion would have been to inflict a great wrong upon her who had offered her life for mine. No, Ajor should be as safe with me as with her own mother, if she had one, which I was inclined to doubt, even though she told me that she had once been a babe and hidden by her mother. I had come to doubt if there was such a thing as a mother in Caspak, a mother such as we know. From the Bo lu to the Kro lu there is no word which corresponds with our word mother. They speak of Ata, or Kor sva jo, meaning reproduction, and from the beginning, and point toward the south, but no one has a mother. After considerable difficulty we gained what we thought was our cave, only to find that it was not, and then we realized that we were lost in the labyrinthine mazes of the great cavern. We retraced our steps and sought the point from which we had started, but only succeeded in losing ourselves the more. Ajor was aghast, not so much from fear of our predicament, but that she should have failed in the functioning of that wonderful sense she possessed in common with most other creatures Caspakian, which makes it possible for them to move unerringly from place to place without compass or guide. Hand in hand we crept along, searching for an opening into the outer world, yet realizing that at each step we might be burrowing more deeply into the heart of the great cliff, or circling futilely in the vague wandering that could end only in death. And the darkness, it was almost palpable and utterly depressing. I had matches, and in some of the more difficult places I struck one, but we couldn't afford to waste them, and so we groped our way slowly along, doing the best we could to keep to one general direction in the hope that it would eventually lead us to an opening into the outer world. When I struck matches, I noticed that the walls bore no paintings, nor was there other sign that man had penetrated this far within the cliff, nor any spoor of animals of other kinds. It would be difficult to guess at the time we spent wandering through those black corridors, climbing steep ascents, feeling our way along the edges of bottomless pits, never knowing at what moment we might be plunged into some abyss, and always haunted by the ever-present terror of death by starvation and thirst. As difficult as it was, I still realized that it might have been infinitely worse had I had another companion than Ajor, courageous, uncomplaining, loyal little Ajor. She was tired and hungry and thirsty, and she must have been discouraged, but she never faltered in her cheerfulness. I asked her if she was afraid, and she replied that here the Wieroo could not get her, and that if she died of hunger, she would at least die with me, and she was quite content that such should be her end. At the time I attributed her attitude to something akin to a dog-like devotion to a new master who had been kind to her. I can take oath to the fact that I did not think it was anything more. Whether we had been imprisoned in the cliff for a day or a week I could not say, nor even now do I know. We became very tired and hungry. The hours dragged. We slept at least twice, and then we rose and stumbled on, always weaker and weaker. There were ages during which the trend of the corridor was always upward. It was heartbreaking work for people in the state of exhaustion in which we then were, but we clung tenaciously to it. We stumbled and fell. We sank through pure physical inability to retain our feet, but always we managed to rise at last and go on. At first, wherever it had been possible, we had walked hand in hand, lest we become separated, and later, when I saw that Ajor was weakening rapidly, We went side by side, I supporting her with an arm about her waist. I still retained the heavy burden of my armament, but with the rifle slung to my back, my hands were free. When I too showed indisputable evidences of exhaustion, Ajor suggested that I lay aside my arms and ammunition; but I told her that as it would mean certain death for me to traverse Caspak without them, I might as well take the chance of dying here in the cave with them, for there was the other chance that we might find our way to liberty. There came a time when Ajor could no longer walk, and then it was that I picked her up in my arms and carried her. She begged me to leave her, saying that after I found an exit I could come back and get her; but she knew, and she knew that I knew, that if I ever did leave her, I could never find her again. Yet she insisted. Barely had I sufficient strength to take a score of steps at a time; then I would have to sink down and rest for 5 to 10 minutes. I don't know what force urged me on and kept me going in the face of an absolute conviction that my efforts were utterly futile. I counted us already as good as dead; but still I dragged myself along until the time came that I could no longer rise, but could only crawl along a few inches at a time, dragging Ajor beside me. Her sweet voice, now almost inaudible from weakness, implored me to abandon her and save myself. She seemed to think only of me. Of course I couldn't have left her there alone, no matter how much I might have desired to do so; but the fact of the matter was that I didn't desire to leave her. What I said to her then came very simply and naturally to my lips. It couldn't very well have been otherwise, I imagine, for with death so close, I doubt if people are much inclined to heroics. "I would rather not get out at all, Ajor," I said to her, "than to get out without you." We were resting against a rocky wall, and Ajor was leaning against me, her head on my breast. I could feel her press closer to me, and one hand stroked my arm in a weak caress; but she didn't say anything, nor were words necessary. After a few minutes' more rest, we started on again upon our utterly hopeless way; but I soon realized that I was weakening rapidly, and presently I was forced to admit that I was through. "It's no use, Ajor," I said. "I've come as far as I can. It may be that if I sleep, I can go on again after." But I knew that that was not true, and that the end was near. "Yes, sleep," said Ajor. "We will sleep together forever." She crept close to me as I lay on the hard floor and pillowed her head upon my arm. With the little strength which remained to me, I drew her up until our lips touched, and then I whispered "Good bye." I must have lost consciousness almost immediately, for I recall nothing more until I suddenly awoke out of a troubled sleep, during which I dreamed that I was drowning, to find the cave lighted by what appeared to be diffused daylight, and a tiny trickle of water running down the corridor and forming a puddle in the little depression in which it chanced that Ajor and I lay. I turned my eyes quickly upon Ajor, fearful for what the light might disclose; but she still breathed, though very faintly. Then I searched about for an explanation of the light, and soon discovered that it came from about a bend in the corridor just ahead of us and at the top of a steep incline; and instantly I realized that Ajor and I had stumbled by night almost to the portal of salvation. Had chance taken us a few yards further, up either of the corridors which diverged from ours just ahead of us, we might have been irrevocably lost. We might still be lost, but at least we could die in the light of day, out of the horrid blackness of this terrible cave. I tried to rise, and found that sleep had given me back a portion of my strength, and then I tasted the water and was further refreshed. I shook Ajor gently by the shoulder, but she did not open her eyes, and then I gathered a few drops of water in my cupped palm and let them trickle between her lips. This revived her so that she raised her lids, and when she saw me, she smiled. "What happened?" she asked. "Where are we?" "We are at the end of the corridor," I replied, "and daylight is coming in from the outside world just ahead. We are saved, Ajor." She sat up then and looked about, and then, quite womanlike, she burst into tears. It was the reaction, of course. And then, too, she was very weak. I took her in my arms.